Yeah, Mackenzie, it's good to connect again. It's been probably over a year since we like met each other. I think that was like last June or something.
Yeah, I think we met each other last June, I think for the first time at a comedy show, right?
Yeah, yep. At one of the comedy shows that Alex Coyne and I put together, and a few other people, and that's how because you were friends with Alex Coyne, I think
Yup.
in my high school, right?
Yeah, I'd known him pretty much I've known him my entire life. We kind of started wrestling together when we were
Right,
really
right.
young and went to school together and kind of just kept up with him over the years. And I saw that he was doing a show down in Lawrenceville, reached out to him, and it ended up being a fun night for all of us. So yeah, it was really cool to connect.
Yes, man. And I see you're drinking that Panera Bread coffee that you got on the deal.
Dude, you put me onto it, man. I don't know that you're ever going to be able to find me without a cup of Panera Bread coffee in my hand because of
No.
that deal.
Did you sign up today? Is that like officially today you signed up, or you've been on that?
Literally, literally after I saw you do it, I was like, I'm going to do this. This is like I almost feel like it's robbery in a way.
Yeah. No, honestly, because dude, when I signed up, first of all, my girlfriend was like, she saw the deal. She says, you should sign up for this. And I said, I had seen it, but I was like, I don't even go to Panera that much. But when she kind of, because when I signed, I don't know if you got like for free or did you have to pay the $8.99?
I got the first month free,
First
and
month
then
free.
$8.99. And so
Right.
a funny story is, so it literally feels like I'm robbing them when I do it. Whenever I go there, this is my second cup today, and it was funny because on my way home from work today, I was like, I'm gonna stop and I've got this new subscription. I'm gonna use it again. And so I get there and I get up to the window and I go, can I use to the drive-through? And I go, can I use my subscription here? Like, can I use it through the drive-through? I didn't read like all of the stipulations. I didn't know if
Right.
you have to go inside to use it or whatever. So I was just like, can I use this in the drive-through? And I was like, yeah, I'll put your phone number in or, however they do it. I was like, oh, sweet. And like, luckily I did it this morning because I looked around in my car without even like thinking about it. And I don't know where my wallet went. I literally lost my wallet the
Wow.
first time I tried to use it. And so I get up to the window and the guy goes, here's your free cup of coffee. And I'm like, it's not really a free cup of coffee, but it feels like it is. Like even the
Feels like it.
employees at Panera, they're like, we're just giving this coffee away. But yeah, no, appreciate you putting me onto it.
Yeah. And then the main realization is that you can get a coffee. I think it's once every 2 hours you can go and theoretically get coffee for free. Well, for
Yeah.
$8.99. But yeah, it's an insane day. And I read on like Reddit that they make like the cost of one pot of coffee for them is one coffee like 260 or something. So like I guess they make coffee super cheap. So that's how it all works. And now I eat at Panera like, at least 2-3 times a week, which I had never gone
Dude.
before to that much. So it's solid.
Okay. So you didn't go prior to, and listen how crazy this is that we're making this out to be like this giant thing, but like it's the little things, I guess, man. Like a $9 subscription for coffee. But I don't ever go there. Like I never go to Panera,
Right.
um, unless it's like the only place that's open. I used to kind of trick myself into thinking like going to Panera was like a healthy option for whatever reason, which, I would get like a sandwich or something. I could get that anywhere.
Right.
But now I see myself going there literally because of this. So
Yeah,
yeah,
man.
it's a good little
It's
deal.
a sweet deal. You'll find yourself going there more often. But anyway, um, yeah, so we had connected actually recently because, and this is kind of related to the theme of this podcast or show. It's at the beginning right now, so who knows? But I
Yeah.
talked to my good friend last week about transitioning into a family business. And then you were like, yeah, I just transitioned out of a family business, which is a super unique perspective. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. Whenever I saw you talking to that guy, it was like, oh, there are a lot of people I think that are in positions either like he's in or
Yeah.
like I'm in. And, I I think that this is going to be a really cool concept because there are a lot of people who are interested in learning more about like, oh, is the dynamic of my family business the same as the other family business, things like that. So
Yeah.
first want to thank you for getting me on the pod. And
Sure, man.
I think there's going to be a lot of people out there that are like, oh, this is a really cool concept, and it'll be pretty cool.
Yeah.
Where do I start, I guess?
Well, I guess first tell us
So
a little bit about the family business, because it is a pretty unique, it's like you said
yeah.
a high end, what you go ahead, you could say it.
So it's in the seniors housing industry.
Yeah.
So there's an entire industry of long-term care facilities, independent living facilities, assisted living facilities, and memory care facilities.
Mm-hmm.
And so basically the seniors housing industry kind of encompasses all of those different types of real estate, you might want to call it, right?
Yeah.
Um, and so what my family does is my dad, was a guy who was born and raised on a farm, and kind of has these very humble roots, these very, like down to earth kind of blue collar, background. And kind of the story that I'm told is that, growing up in the country on the farm doing those kinds of things was just never going to be his thing when he got older. He saw his entire family doing that type of work and never really felt any kind of connection to it. Always felt like just didn't feel like that's where he fit in, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Maybe he was
And
like the black sheep of the family per se, didn't really fit.
yeah, in a lot of ways, a lot of his family does kind of fit that kind of mold of, working on the farm, that kind of deal, and they enjoy it.
Right.
And I enjoy those things too. That's kind of like where my roots are from, and that's kind of like my family. But he just never saw that for himself, and so what he did was started working in the hospitals whenever he was like 18 or 19 years old. And I think his initial idea for himself was to be maybe a physician or something in medicine, in that respect. And and I guess pretty early on discovered that wasn't going to be his route. I don't know. He's a savvy guy. He's an entrepreneurial kind of guy, and kind of kept getting promoted from very ground level in the hospitals.
Yeah.
And so would do different positions in the hospitals, and kind of worked his way up to a managerial type position in the hospitals. And this is all back in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and kept getting opportunities like that within the healthcare system. And I think how it went is maybe a long-term care association or organization approached him and was like, hey, you're doing a really good job running these different divisions in the hospital systems. We think that you'd be a really good fit to come and help us run a region of our long-term care company.
Mm-hmm.
And so at that point, it was a mid-sized company, and he took that opportunity. And so he
Mm-hmm.
left the acute care setting, which is the hospitals, and started to work for this company in long-term care.
Okay.
And pretty quickly realized, like, oh, they're in the hospital systems. It's a huge kind of machine. And I think that his initial idea was that he wanted to become maybe a CEO of a hospital or kind of climb the ladder in the hospital systems. But he saw long-term care as, a real opportunity to kind of do his own thing and kind of recreate the space in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm.
He would walk around nursing homes and assisted living facilities, and basically, back then it was this was the mid 90s, early 90s, whenever he was doing this, saw a lot of things that I think that he felt that he could do differently.
Mm-hmm.
He got pretty good at managing the buildings and saw them as saw it as an industry where he could kind of do his own thing and put his own twist on it.
Mm-hmm.
And so he continued to learn in long-term care. And when the opportunity basically presented itself through an investment group, they kind of approached him and were like, hey, would you like to start your own thing? We'd like to give you a portfolio of your own buildings and kind of, create your own company. You have this unique take on it, where he felt that the settings and the environments that he was working in could be better.
Mm.
And so he took that and kind of ran with that and he started this company in 2004, started to build really kind of higher end assisted living type facilities.
Wow.
So they have independent living, assisted living, and memory care. And so the whole idea behind his company is that he wants to give people that end of life experience in a very dignified kind of upscale setting, as opposed to historically where they would go to maybe like a Medicaid or a state reimbursed type setting.
Right.
That is just usually pretty unsavory to a lot of people. They're like, I do not want to do that at all. And he kind of wanted to flip the narrative and kind of create these places where people were proud to live in, and where they were going to get this dignified quality of care.
Right.
And so that's kind of the start, the origin story of his company, was a guy who kind of took a lot of opportunities and kind of ran with them, and has created a really cool business up into this day.
It sounds like there's a few things that pop out. I think number one is that willingness to kind of, because he almost came from a family situation as well in the at the farm, so he had to leave a situation which is always tough, enter a new kind of industry, which is also long-term care, probably not like the sexiest industry for a young guy to get into, so he goes into this industry which is not a lot of people probably are trying to get into, and not only is he in it, but he's thriving in it, always getting up to the next level, to the point where then he sees all the things that others don't see. I think this is like very inspiring for anyone trying to do their own thing, no matter what industry you're in. It could be sexy or non-sexy. There's always opportunity.
For sure.
It sounds like he really capitalized.
Yeah. And that's kind of it, he's the type of person that, I don't know what his home life was like growing up. And I don't know, what that whole dynamic was. My grandparents were awesome. But I do know that they didn't come from a background of financial resources,
Mm-hmm.
And so I think a lot of his motivation, as he got older, was to really give my family and, his children, the financial resources and kind of the life that he never had. And so his kind of driving force that was kind of like the driving force to kind of find the opportunities that he did, and create the company that he did.
Right.
Today, it's kind of taken on a mind of its own, and it's kind of blown up, I think, probably a lot further than he ever would have guessed that it would have.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's where a lot of that motivation comes from, is just, having a childhood or growing up in an environment where, maybe his parents couldn't give him or, buy for him just like the latest sneakers that were out, or, whatever it was that he wanted.
Right. So where do you enter the picture? I mean, so you said he started in 2004. So you were around, you kind of saw this kind of building from scratch, right? As a kid?
Yeah. Yeah, I pretty much saw it from the ground up. I remember distinctly, I remember the weekend. I think it might have been around the time he turned 40. I don't know. I'm bad at dates and bad at like timelines. I do know that the company was started in 2004.
Yeah.
But I remember we had all of these flamingos out in the yard for his 40th birthday. And this was right around the time where he transitioned from the company that he was working for,
Mm-hmm.
the company kind of where he developed his chops in a lot of ways. Kind of the way the company where he was like, oh, I can go out on my own and do this. I remember it pretty well. In 2004, I would have been 16 years ago. I would have been like 8 or 9 years old. And I remember, distinctly the transition from the previous position or the previous company into what is his company's called Paramount Health Resources. I remember that pretty well. And so I remember, you know, a lot of people kind of giving him props and giving him kudos to kind of venture out onto his own,
Right.
you know, a lot of pats on the back and things like that. And I remember pretty early on a lot of comments being made to me, you know, about, hey, you know, this would be really cool if you go and, you know, step into your dad's shoes at a certain point.
Right.
Um, which on the outside, you know, that sounded so cool to me. You know, my dad's my idol, and you know, he's out doing his thing, and all of his buddies are shaking his hand. And so I remember seeing that at a very early age, like,
Right.
oh, that's a really cool thing to do. That's a really noble thing to do, is to go out on your own and kind of create this company.
Right.
So I remember like sticking by his side whenever I was a little kid, you know, just watching all of it and and just being really fascinated. I didn't know what he was doing in terms of like the X's and O's of operating his business,
Right.
but I always knew that it was like really, it was like super cool that he was out kind of just doing his own thing. And back then, the thing that I saw was he didn't have to adhere to a 9 to 5 schedule, you know,
Mm-hmm.
although he was working probably, you know, twice what everyone else was.
Right.
I remember, you know, not having to adhere to a 9 to 5. He would come home when he wanted to and kind of operate his business that way. And
Right.
so I would just see that. And I remember at a very early age thinking, oh, that's this like the coolest thing in the world, is to like own your own thing and to be your own boss.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
So you
so I
clearly,
started working. Yeah,
yeah,
good.
yeah. You clearly wanted to embody the same kind of vision that he was presenting, and it wasn't, you know, it wasn't. I'm sure it was like a big task in your mind, like, wow, like, you know, this is a huge thing, but you were ready for the challenge, and at an early age became comfortable with the idea that this is the path that you also want to go down.
For sure. Yeah, I would even go so far as to say like that path was in a way chosen for me.
Yeah.
It might be unfair to say that. I don't know. But it just made sense on paper, right? Like, why wouldn't you? You know, he's building this company. It's an industry. So he's building the company. It's an industry that everyone talks about in terms of like the longevity of it and the demographic shifts of the country, and you know how many baby boomers are going to need long-term care. And
Right.
so on paper, you know, I was always like, oh, this just is kind of like a no-brainer to me, you know. Why wouldn't I want to continue to follow in those steps? And so I did, you know. I started working for him when I was 15 years old.
Wow.
He
That's early.
actually
That's
developed
nice.
a building. Yeah, yeah. He developed a building and built a building, um, not even a quarter of a mile from my house, like where, like my childhood home,
Yeah.
which was kind of like a cool like legacy thing in a way, where he was like, he's literally building this giant seniors housing complex like right in the backyard of where
Right.
I'm growing up. And again, you know, I was like, oh, I'm gonna go. I don't remember exactly how I felt at that age, but I think that it was like 50% me wanting to start in the family business, and then 50% him encouraging me to start in the family business. Like, you kind of have to start from the ground floor.
Right.
If this is something that you want to do long term, it's going to be really important for you to understand the nuts and the bolts of the operation.
Right.
And so I realized that at a really young age, and I was like, oh, this is going to make sense for me. Like, I'm going to start as young as I can and learn everything that I can. And so I did. I started when I was 15. He developed this brand new building, and this was in 2009, maybe 2008, 2009. The building was brand new, didn't have any senior citizens, elderly, geriatrics living in it yet.
Yeah.
I was the first employee to get hired in the kitchen at that point. So I was a server in the dietary department.
Right.
And I can remember really early on um, being a little apprehensive about it, because I remember going to work with him prior to this and interacting with you know, the elderly people that lived in the buildings. And I
Mm-hmm.
remember having like really I wouldn't say really negative experiences, but I do remember now looking back on it, there was a lady who had dementia, who was, you know, cognitively impaired and having some confusion. And I remember my brother and I, we went to work with my dad one day, and she didn't chase us, but she wouldn't stop following us around. And we were like so young, we had no idea what was going on.
Right.
And so like by the end of the day, we were literally hiding under this table from her, because like she wouldn't stop following us around and trying to kiss us on the cheeks, and like had this like really scarring experience really early on. And I was like, wow, is this what I want to do? Is this like, am I comfortable doing this? And so like those were the first like kind of experiences that I had with it. And so at 15 years old, although I was maybe, you know, however many years older, I was like, oh God, is this how it's all going to be? And so I remember being the first guy working in the dietary department at 15 years old. And I'm this, you know, guy who's really into sports and, you know, just hanging out with my 15-year-old friends. And I'm like, how in the heck am I ever going to be able to communicate with somebody who is 60, 70, 80 years older than I am? Like at that point, my communication was pretty much limited to that with my grandparents, you know, and other than that, I don't really know.
Right.
And so I remember the first
going to high school and you're just used to going to high school and hanging out with your friends and, you know, seeing your grandparents every now and then. It's not like
exactly
daily basis.
My worldview was like really limited at that point. In terms of like just hanging out with my buddies, you know, the only thing that we're worried about is, you know, where are we going to go? Whose car are we going to pile into on a Friday night and go and eat? You know, that was like kind of, and like having those conversations.
Right.
And so, that was my initial kind of like thought of the business. And I was apprehensive. All that is to say, I remember the first guy moving into the building, his name was Ray, and fallen at home and broke his hip, and was in one of those negative situations where he didn't want to necessarily move from his home, but due to just kind of the needs that he had in terms of like day-to-day care, he couldn't live at home anymore. And so this guy moved into the building, and I remember like at first, you know, I was kind of clumsy, I was kind of awkward around him. It was my first job trying to figure out how to serve food to this 93-year-old man. Didn't really talk or interact too much over the first couple of days. After those first couple of days, you know, I started to have kind of like small talk with him, you know, 5-10 minute conversations. Because again, he was the only guy in the dining room. I was the only guy in the dietary department.
Right.
And so, you know, it kind of built up over time where, you know, those 10-minute conversations would turn into 20-minute conversations, you know, and he would tell me something the day before, and I would ask him, you know, about how the Pirate game was on TV or something like that the next day. And those conversations would turn from 10 minutes to 20 minutes to an hour, to 2 hours, to at a certain point, he was still the only one who was living in the building. And I was serving him breakfast. And again, I was the only employee in the dietary department. So I would literally just serve him, and I would sit there and I would talk to him from the time that he would eat breakfast until it was time for lunch.
Wow.
Because I would do the 2 shifts, and we would literally sit there and we would have these conversations that like changed my life in so many ways, because my perspective shifted from looking at him, looking at Ray, or looking at these people that live in the buildings from just old people or elderly people, people who are so much different than I am, to, oh my goodness, like I'm enjoying these conversations with Ray and these people in the buildings, maybe even more than the conversations that I'm having with my friends. Right. Because there's so much depth, there's so much context to the stories that they're telling me. There's so much to it. And I remember it really kind of just like tugging on my heart, because I'm like, oh man, these people, like, they want somebody to talk to. They just want to hang. They're like trying to do the same thing that, you know, fast forward 5 years, my buddies and I are doing in college. You know, right. They just want to sit and kind of shoot the breeze. And so I think that was a really important thing for me, really early on, to kind of like develop that connection with people. And I say that that's a really important thing that I developed really early on, especially because I have entrepreneurial pursuits kind of my own down the line. And so it really made me understand like how important that like that employee to client or staff to customer relationship is. And I always say it sounds cheesy, but it literally gave me like a degree in interacting with people and talking with people.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, just such a different phase of life, and just something that's so much different than what I could have ever really been exposed to if I just would have stayed within the confines of my 15-year-old or high school buddies, you know?
Yeah, man, that I think it's coming from a place where, you know, you, like you said, you're just chilling with your friends all the time, to going to the opposite spectrum, which is like somebody who's at the end of their life. I mean, you get a
Yep.
whole brand new perspective, and it sounds like that also solidified, like maybe you began to understand what the business was really about, and like it's really about these people at the end of the day, and like this housing is for this type of person that needs these interactions, which is all facilitated by the company in a way.
100%.
Yeah.
And that to me, you kind of hit it right on the head. That is the most important thing. You know, I went on to do so many different positions for him and his company. I worked in from dietary, I worked in housekeeping, and I did these for like long stints of time, not just like 2 weeks and just to say you did it.
Right.
I was really like gun ho about like learning, like, okay, what is this position? What does this position do? And why the heck do we have these people in the building doing what they do?
Right.
Um, you know, so I worked in housekeeping. I worked as a maintenance assistant for a summer. I worked as a receptionist in one of the buildings for probably 6 months. And then I worked in the nursing department, which is, you know, to me, the most valuable and important aspect of what our business does, which is really the people who are taking care of the people. And
Hmm.
so I worked as a resident care aide, where I was in, you know, their apartments. I was in their rooms, you know, helping them take care of them. I worked as a med tech, which is basically a resident aide. It's not a nurse. It's somebody who's basically an aide, who can pass medications to people. And then I worked as another really eye-opening experience for me was working as a hospice aide. And so that's people who are near the end of their life and are, you know, within 6 months generally of passing away.
Wow.
And I was the one
Yeah.
who was, you know, taking care of those people, showering them, getting them dressed, bathing, you know, the whole 9 yards, was responsible for all of that. And so it gave me, like you said, you know, just this really cool perspective on not necessarily um, the elderly population, but like what really ends up mattering to people a lot of times at the end of the day, and gave me that real kind of visceral connection to our business and
Right.
our customers, and, you know, why what we're doing is special,
Yeah. Man,
you know?
that sounds really awesome. And it sounds like you got like so many different experiences, not only like you said with people, but also, you know, career wise, like you got to see all the different roles in the business. So you've kind of laid down the groundwork on, you know, your entrance in the company, overview of the company. So let's talk about now. You recently, right, have left now the company and have gone on to do something else. So can you talk a little bit about what you're doing now and what it's been like kind of what led up to that transition out, and your decision making on that one?
For sure. Yeah. So, you know, I kind of just went into depth about my experience starting with the company and working with the company up until I'm now 27 years old, and, you know, kind of what that whole timeline looked like. And um, while all of that was, I would never trade any of that experience that I had for the world. I think that it was the coolest thing in the world that I was exposed to basically just so many different aspects of not only healthcare, not only senior care, not only business, but what it's like in the fundamentals of owning and operating your own kind of business.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that that was like the real beauty of what I did from age 15 to 27. I did have a few stints in there where I lived in California for a year and worked for another kind of owner operator guy out there, not in
Mm-hmm.
seniors housing. He was in
Okay.
multifamily residential real estate. So he
Yeah.
owned just a bunch of apartment buildings. Um, Worked for him for about a year. Um, did internships for other companies, but up until this past year, my work experience had been pretty limited to Paramount, my dad's company.
Yeah.
And so that was all great. And I found myself ultimately in this. So whenever I graduated and I came home from California, um, I went right back to working for my dad's business. That was the idea behind coming home from California, was to continue to learn, the upper level management aspects of my dad's business. Graduated, got my degree. This is the track that I'm on, staying on it. And so I came back, started to manage some of his buildings and work in a business office and things like that. And was exposed to that aspect of it. And then I found myself in these sales and marketing type roles. And I really found those roles to kind of be the roles where I excel the best.
Yeah.
And it's something that really is super interesting to me. And apparently, looking back on my life, I've kind of always had this kind of nature about myself, this intrinsic ability to sit and, talk to people and kind of relate to them and
Right.
figuring out, what the problem is and, how can I help you solve that? Coming from a really good place and trying to help them see that what I'm trying to do is help them. And so I came back and like I said, from California, I found myself in these sales roles and started doing, really well. My dad at that point, when I came back, was in kind of this hyper growth mode where he acquired, from the time I came back in a span of about 4 years, seven buildings from the time that I came back. So his company grew significantly
Wow.
when I got back.
Yeah.
And so it was this like really cool, like whirlwind of everything going on. And I was exposed to, again, just so many different phases and aspects of business and what it's like to own and operate your business. And I was excelling, I was doing really well. But at a certain point, I got to this point in my career with Paramount where I felt like there was something in my professional development that was lacking in a way.
Mm-hmm.
I knew that I was pretty good and I was doing well at selling buildings and basically helping people understand why it would be a benefit to them to move into one of the buildings. I
Yeah.
was directing his sales and marketing team for all the buildings for a while. I was the regional director for a while. And was pretty good at that. And that fit me really well because it was a very objective type position. So I
Mm-hmm.
never felt like, oh, he's just the owner's son, he's just in that position because he's the owner's son, like was selling. So, that told me that we were doing well. And,
There was
that's
real
what I was
numbers and financials to look
about.
to. Yeah.
Yep.
You had
Yep.
targets
And so
and
it was cool.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Um, and so it was cool. I liked it, but I still felt like, there was something missing that working for the family business for my entire life, I would have really been missing or lacking kind of some key development that should happen in everyone's life where they kind of go and they, test their skills in the waters, you kind of go
Mm-hmm.
out and see what you're really made of.
Right.
Um, and I think that, I got to a certain point where I was like, I've got to go and like see if I can do this elsewhere. Um, you know, the family business is great and it's going to excel. My dad still runs the company and he's kind of the meat and potatoes of the company. He's going to make sure that it's doing well. I need to go out there and kind of see, how other people are doing it. See the good, the bad, and the ugly of the entire industry and of other sales and marketing type positions.
Right.
And so I would say about 6 months ago, I kind of made that decision and I started to kind of create, in a way, like an exit plan where I was like, it was a very amicable thing between my dad and I, where I was like, hey, appreciate all of the opportunities that I've had here. You've been nothing but great and have given me every opportunity under the sun. But I think for my professional development, and maybe even for the continuous development of Paramount, it would be really good for me to go out and see what it's like, kind of pursue some other opportunities and see what it's like to kind of do similar work to what I'm doing at your company, and see if there's something else, that's out there that might pique my interest.
Right.
I don't want to hang my hat on the rest of my life that, the only industry and the only thing that I ever did was worked for a family business. Although I like it, it's a great business, and I think that he does an excellent job. I don't know that I'm ready to hang my hat and say that, seniors housing or the long-term care kind of industry is where I'll be for the rest of my life. So
Right.
that was kind of the impetus behind making that decision.
Yeah, and that's not an easy decision too. And I think it's interesting that you said one of the main things is you wanted to kind of test yourself, because when you only work for a family business, I think you're right. There's even if it's not true, you might have that in your mind that, is this reality? Like, can I do this elsewhere? Even though you probably can, and it's all in your head, you're actually, taking the step forward to, let the world show you. And I think it's pretty bold, it's a good
For
move.
sure. Yeah, dude, it's a lot like, I'm a very, I don't want to say theatrical, but I kind of learn by stories, and I view the world through stories, and to me it feels a lot kind of like the hero's journey in a way, where it's like, you know what's back at home, kind of what that whole deal is.
Right.
In order to figure out who you are as a person, you've got to kind of leave home and,
Right.
kind of test the waters, slay some dragons away from home, and
Right.
see what the world has to offer you in so many ways. It sounds cheesy, but that's kind
No,
of a
it's
way to
true.
look at it. And yeah, it's definitely like I don't want to say courageous thing, because I know that the situation and the environment that I came from was a really good one, and so it's like, to me, I just think that this is what a normal person would do,
Right.
is kind of leave that behind and kind of see, what else is out there. Otherwise, I feel like my perspective on the world is going to be limited through working for a family business forever.
Right. So, yeah, I think the hero's journey is a great reference. I think that's exactly what this is, and it sounds a lot like a parallel journey to what your father did in a way, because he had to leave his family farm and, go out on his own and test himself too. So I think it comes full circle in that, the two are related. And do you think that, like, is your plan to, you didn't shut that door necessarily. It's just, let me go see what's out there. Maybe I'll come back afterwards.
Yeah. Um, you're exactly right. So I found a company that is basically like the bones of that story that I just told you and how I got to where I'm at today.
Yep.
I found a company that is basically that exact same structure, being a guy who's kind of entrepreneurial and savvy, and saw long-term care as a really good opportunity to help people, and also to create a really stable long-term business.
Mm-hmm.
And so he did that back in the 70s. The company that I work for now, the guy who started this company.
Yep.
And so his company is significantly larger than my dad's company. Um, let's call it just 4 times the size of my dad's company,
Sure.
just for like rough numbers. And so I really wanted to seek out a company that was basically just 30 years fast forwarded from where I came from,
Mm-hmm.
just to see like what are the struggles, what are the hurdles that I'm going to overcome or have to overcome. What does the company look like when it grows to a point like that?
Right.
What is the dynamic like of trying to operate a company that's 4 sizes the size of his? And so, I don't know, to answer you. I don't know, today, like what the long-term thing is. I do know that I love sales, I love marketing, I love advertising, and I've kind of taken myself and see myself as more of a sales marketer, advertiser that works in seniors housing and long-term care.
Mm-hmm.
And so, as opposed to a long-term care employee that does sales and marketing.
Right.
And
Okay.
so, certainly open to considering opportunities that might be outside of the industry in different facets. I think that at the end of the day, I would like to have my kind of own company. Apparently, it's just kind of how my dad and I are wired. It might just be in our DNA that that's kind of like how we like to operate.
Right. Sure.
And so that really, to me, at the end of the day, is the ultimate goal, is to have my kind of own thing. If it would intertwine with, the family business, that would be great.
Yeah.
But today, sitting here today, um, my end goal isn't necessarily to go back and run the company like it was at one point.
Right. Well, I think that's a pretty balanced way to look at it, because obviously you just made the decision. So, you know, it's always good to not predict the,
Yeah.
try and see like, oh, I just left. Okay. But am I going to, it's almost like irrelevant at this point, and you're just focusing on what's in front of you right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's just it. We're kind of taking some opportunities, and it's felt really good to come to a new city. I don't know if we talked, but I now live in Nashville.
Oh, wow. Nashville. Okay,
And
I was
kind
wondering.
of,
Yeah.
yeah, so
Very
kind of
nice.
taking some opportunities down here in Nashville, kind of creating a new network down here. Some that I know, through working at Paramount, and then some that are totally new. It's been a really cool kind of like eye-opening experience. Luckily, the first 3 months of my new job have gone, couldn't ask for them to go better than they have.
Very good.
And so kind of that apprehension, or that, kind of nagging feeling in the back of my head, where like, oh, can you go and do this somewhere else? It was kind of put to rest kind of quickly, because I was able to come and, be successful in the position that I was in. And so that's been cool. And it's been like a lot of weight off of my shoulders. They're like, oh, okay, you can do this. Like, not just within the context of your family's business, you can do this kind of role. And so that's kind of opened up so many different opportunities for me, just in my own eyes. Like, all right, you tried this, why don't you try this? Or,
Yeah.
kind of continue to explore different opportunities.
Right. So I think we're we're going to try and wrap it up, because I think it's been a good amount of time. Not that I want to wrap it up. It's been a very good conversation, but what would you say?
Yeah.
Well, first of all, before we end, listen, man, it's an amazing, journey that you've had, and I'm really happy that you shared this all with me. And I think that I am inspired, because a lot of people I don't think would leave, whatever, not even a family business, but it's hard to leave any job, leaving the
Yeah.
comfort zone, no matter what kind of situation it is, whether it's a job or a town, you're in your hometown, like a friend group, whatever. So I have mad respect for that. And then, yeah, of course. But my final question to you would be, let's say that you're somebody who is in that position, and you're in we can use the family business example for this context, but what do you say to that person that's thinking like, should I go do something else? How do I do something else? What do I do if I do something else? What advice would you have for them?
Something that I would say is that, and I'm not going to say what I think a lot of people say in this position, or maybe what you might expect me to say is, oh, you can always turn around and you can always go back.
Right.
Because that's pretty inherent. I think that what I would say to somebody who might be in a similar position to what I'm in is, get very real about, what it is that you want out of your life. And don't sell yourself short. Everyone can achieve the things that they want to do. You've got to try, though. If you don't step outside of that comfort zone, and it's such a cliche thing to say, but I'm here to tell you there was definitely anxiety associated with making the move, and some fear around it. But I just kept telling myself that it'll all be okay. Aim really small. You don't need to go off and you know, be the president of the company that you go and find a new job with.
Right.
Do something that you know you can do. Make a lateral move first if you need to, and then just continue to build on that and continue to aim as small as you need to. Any kind of increase or any kind of forward momentum is still forward momentum.
Right.
And so just get really introspective about, is it something that you actually want to do? Do you want to go and see what you're made of and what you could be?
Yeah.
And just do it. It'll all be okay. It'll work itself out.
Yeah. Just do it. That's what it all comes down to. You just got to take that.
Cliche. Yeah.
Yeah, man.
But it works.
It works. Well, I'm glad to hear that it's been working out for you. And listen, it's just really great to catch up. I know we've been, back and forth on Instagram and all this. It's been great to follow each other. And I hope to come. I know you're in Nashville now. I'm really trying to get back to Pittsburgh. I moved out like in last August. I haven't been back since. So I need to make a trip back. See the fam.
Yeah, man. We'll definitely have to keep in touch. If you ever want to make your way down here to Nashville, my door is always open, for sure. But have loved just keeping up with you. Just always appreciate your perspective on things. So we'll definitely have to do it again.
All right. Well, Mackenzie, thank you very much, man. We definitely will. This is a great conversation.
For sure, man. I'll talk to you soon.
All right, bro. Have a good night.
Later.
Bye-bye.
Take it easy, bro.
Bye.